Hello, everybody. Welcome to what I'm calling 2025. I'm calling it the Great Alteration. Now, there may be a great altercation too, but it's the Great Alteration. I'm Glenn Arthur Kaufman. I'm the Mount Shasta Astrologer. As you're listening to this, I would trust everybody will get the recording of this. So I trust that you don't need to take notes. I'd like you to just sit back and close your eyes and listen and look with your inner eye, because I'm going to do my best to paint a picture with words about what's going on. And I know everybody is different, but I have found that if I close my eyes when I'm listening to somebody, I can envision it better. I can experience it better rather than looking at the way the person's hair is or looking at the background of a particular person or so on. So I invite you to do that. One of the big things, would you put that in the other room, please? One of the big things for this year, I want to start with an overview. I want to start with a perspective, and then I'm going to drill down into some of the major things. And one of the big things I noticed is that for the first half of the year in 2025, the fire element is building. There's planets that are moving into fire signs, and so on. And then the second half of the year, the water is building. And so we go from fire to water. And it's a pretty obvious change right about July and August and so on. 2025 is an excellent year for transits. And I'm not just saying this to get likes, okay? Most of you, if you know me, I don't pull punches. If it's going to be a harsh year, I'm going to tell you. I remember with 2020, I was reminding people how difficult a year that was going to be. And I was watching all of these well-known astrologers talking how great it was going to be. And I'm going, what's going on here? And it was for clicks. And I don't do that. I have too many planets in Scorpio to just paper over the difficulty or things like that. So great transits this year, especially January through May. Matter of fact, the only harsh transits, and I wouldn't even call them harsh because they're Jupiter transits, is Jupiter square Uranus and Jupiter square Neptune, okay, in June. And like I said, Jupiter transits, even squares, are rarely very difficult. So there's very little difficulty this year. And even with the eclipses and the nodes and so on, we're going from fire to water. The solar eclipse that we have in March is fire. The eclipse that we end up, one of the solars that we end up with well, I'll get to it later, but by the time it's September, we've moved into water. We start the year with the north node in Aries, and it moves into Pisces, and there's this shift from fire to water. And I'm assuming most people understand what the mythological term, it was one of the most important gods in Roman mythology. It was called the Janus, and it was the two-headed god, and it was known for looking forward into the future, back into the past. It ruled gateways and doorways and things, and it was considered one of the strongest gods, you might say, in the Roman pantheon. Well, 2025 is a big Janus year. It's amazing that we have so many retrogrades and what I'm calling crossover points or crossing points. So astrologers call them ingresses and so on, but I like to use the word crossing over and crossing back. And in 2025 now, we have 19 different crossover and crossback periods of time. 10 of them will be backing and forthing across the Pisces Aries cusp. And anybody who's familiar with astrology will realize that the end of Pisces and the beginning of the Aries is where you reset the whole zodiac. It's the jumping off point of the zodiac. A little later, I'm going to get into the issue about is Mount Shasta the root chakra or the crown chakra and so on. But we have a massive amount, 19 different doorways and crossover points and thresholds that we are dealing with as a culture, as a world this year. And the idea that we're moving into the future, then back into the past, I almost jokingly wanted to secondarily call the 2025 forecast, wait a minute, don't lock the door, I forgot something. You know, and it was the idea of you walk out the door and you go, oh shoot, you know, I got to go back and get something. It's a lot of how this year is going to be like, especially toward the fall, you know. And so from a perspective, there's two major perspectives that I want to talk about here. And one is a planetary perspective, or the cycles within our solar system, the Pluto transits, the Saturn transits, the Mercury retrogrades, and so on. And the other one is the progression cycle, the 26,000 year, 2100 per age roughly cycle. Everybody knows we're moving into the Aquarian Age and so on. Okay. From a planetary perspective, most astrologers look at 10 major outer planet cycles from Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. I still think Pluto is a planet. I am never going to call it, you know, something other than a planet. So now I'm an astrological minimalist. I'm old school. I rarely use any of the asteroids in my work. I'll use Chiron because it's been around since 1977, but the other long-term cycles and things like that, I don't even bother. There's just way too much, as I see it, within the astrology chart. So now, the 10 major cycles in astrology. All right? Prior to 2012, it took 130, a cycle, there's an in-breath, there's an out-breath to a cycle. Half the cycle is cumulative, and the other half of the cycle is almost destructive, or an in-breath and an out-breath, okay? It took 130 years prior to 2012 to move from out-breath cycles or destructive cycles to 3 in-breath or creative cycles. Since 2012, and pretty much starting in 2020, from 2020 to 2026, we are going to have, out of these 10 cycles, we're going to have 6 cycles. Some of them already started in 2020, but the last one will be in February of 2026. By the time we get to the spring and summer of 2026, we are going to have 9 out of 10 of these world-class, large-scale, long-term cycles will be in creative, inspirational periods of time. And years ago, I was calling this period of time, 25, 26, and into a little bit of 2027, I was calling it the new roaring 20s, you know. And this was before COVID, and this was before 2020, and so on. And it's like, okay, well, I still think we're on that path, because complacency never warrants creation. When people are comfortable, when they're not being challenged, we don't really move forward. We tend to just stay in our own little bubbles, okay? But by early 2026, we're going to have 9 out of the major 10 cycles all in our solar system in opening, creative, affirmative, fruition-based cycles. Now, starting in the summer of 2026, they start to dissipate, but it takes years. It takes like 20 years before we get down to 7 opening and 6 opening cycles. So this is it, folks. Since 2020, the things that have been going on are major opportunistic, birth-related opening potential. I guess is the best way to put it. All right. Now, the other perspective, of course, is the age, all right, or the progressions, where we're moving into the age of Aquarius. Nobody really knows what that is. I've been watching this for a long time, and I've read all the books on 2012 and all of this, and a lot of people were saying there was a 36-year, 40-year cycle and so on. To me, it seemed like it was from 1984 to 2024. That 40-year cycle was like the doorway, the opening, the window into the Aquarian Age. And as we get into 2025, I am no longer calling it the crowning of the Aquarian Age. I'm calling it the birth of the Aquarian Age, or in essence, the grand entrance to the Aquarian Age. And I'll get into that. Okay, but it's like, are we ready? One of the things to remember about ages, if you look back through history, when humanity changes or shifts ages, we don't just go from the manifestation of one cycle into the other and everything's great. You know, it's okay. We're moving into the Aquarian Age. Oh, that's peace and love and brotherly, sisterly love and so on. No, it's if you study history, you'll see that that the movement of from one age to another is much more like smacking a bell, and it vibrates really hard and loud, and then over time it comes to a center or to an equal. And at the moment, I think much of what we've seen since 2020 has been the negative side of Aquarius, which has to do with isolation and separation, and rather than the inclusiveness and so on. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that too as we go through here. But first, I want to point out the idea that the main thing that we need to look at is what I'm calling the 2012 Mayan blackout of December of 2012. All right. To me, I'm calling that the night the lights went out, you know, and it's a cosmic power outage. And for the first time in over 5,000 years, the sun completely blocked the high frequency particles, the radioactive isotopes, all this stuff that has been bathing and beaming the Earth for thousands of years. And for a 3-day period of time, everything got filtered or shut off or distorted or mutated by the sun. And for a 3-day period, our DNA, our genes, our glands were unfettered. They were no longer restricted by the energy that we have been bathed in as a people for thousands of years. And now, well, 2024 was one Jupiter cycle later, but we are starting to see now what that development was. The mRNA vaccine stuff, all that kind of stuff, is science's way of attempting to corral and point that mutation, that evolution of our DNA in a particular direction. Whether it's good or bad, I'm not going to get into that. I'm just wanting to point out the idea that 2012 was amazing. And again, prior to that, it took 30, 40 years at a time for a cycle in history to move into a period of time where it was being opening or creative. But since 2020, we've supercharged that. So, by the way, for those of you who are into the whole UAP or UFO phenomenon, I'm pretty sure that since that 2012 unfettering of our DNA, there's been plenty of other races that are like, oh, we got to study them. Let's watch what happens. So let's keep an eye on what's going on there. So now there was 2 other things that also happened, okay? And this can be a little bit confusing, but there's what's called the grand conjunctions, and there's what's called the great conjunctions. Okay, the grand conjunctions are when you get 5 or more major outer planetary cycle conjunctions. And we had that in 2020. That was a grand conjunction. Prior to that, we hadn't had a grand conjunction since 1821. And 1821 was a pivotal year. It was the Monroe Doctrine. It was where humanity kind of said, okay, there's an old world and a new world, and we're going to separate the two, and we're going to start moving in this new direction. It was the discovery of electromagnetism. It was the discovery of dynamic and electrodynamic actions and formulation and electromechanical rotation and so on. And that radically changed the world. Okay, the largest and biggest grand conjunction was 576 BC, and it was Zoroaster and Gautama, Pythagoras, Lao Tzu, Buddha, a whole bunch of, it was more of a spiritual thing, but that was the largest of the grand conjunctions, happened in 576 BC. The one that we just had in 2020 is sort of a middle of the road one. It was Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. It wasn't the three outer planets like 576 BC, but it was important. And it was important for another reason, and that's because of the great conjunctions. And so the grand conjunctions, and when you get 5 or more conjunctions in a year, the great conjunctions have to do with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions. As they move through elements about every 200 years, they roughly their conjunctions will fall in different elements: fire, earth, air, or water. We're just finishing up almost a 200-year period where the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions were in Earth. We've now, since 2020, moved and stayed in the air element. It's going to be around for almost 200 years. Okay, the last time in history when we had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions happening in the world in air signs was the beginning of the 13th century to the beginning of the 15th century. And again, if you study history, that was the Renaissance. Okay, that was when trade routes opened up, the Silk Road opened up, Marco Polo was doing his thing, and it's like the Earth spread out. The information of what was available in different parts of the planet spread around the planet. I think this time, of course, we've got 200 years to go, but I think this time it's going to be that the Earth spreads out on the winds of other planets. We're going to actually leave the Earth and disseminate the Earthlings among other planets in the solar system. So that should be interesting. It's kind of blown to the wind, so on. So, all right. Now, there's something else that I'm calling, and I've been looking at this for about 20 years now, and I'm calling it the grand entrance to the Aquarian Age. And we are now in it, and it roughly started back in 2022, but especially as of November 19th of 2024 until July of 2025, every single planet in our solar system changes signs. And the idea of that happening, when you think, okay, Pluto can take 18 to 20 years, Neptune can take 13 to 16 years, Uranus takes 7 years, Saturn 2.5 years. The chances of those happening are very rare. The last time that happened was 1956 here on Earth. And prior to that, I've looked back a few hundred years and I could not find another one. Okay, so 1956, one of the things that and let me back up a second. When a planet changes signs, we change attitudes. Signs are attitudes, is the best way I would like to explain that. And so we are going to have every single representation of the powers that we hold as humans, as humanity, are biological entities, whether it's the masculine Mars energy, the Venus energy, the transformative energy of Pluto, every single one, the spiritual one, Neptune, they're all changing attitudes. They're all changing signs between November and July of 2025. To me, I think this is radical. And with Pluto moving into Aquarius, which only happens roughly once every 2.5 centuries, right? I would like to say this is a pivot period for the Aquarian Age, okay? Now, the Aquarian Age, again, we are not just going to move into the love and light part of the Aquarian Age. All right. I had an old teacher, Richard Eidemann, who used to say the classic archetypal Aquarian energy, okay, not Aquarius, sun sign. Aquarian archetypal energy will step over the bum in the doorways to feed the whales. Okay, and this says a lot about the Aquarian energy. If you understand classic, traditional, elemental, the basis definitions of the planets, Aquarius is considered kind of a cold sign. It reminds me of the Spock phrase from Star Trek: the good of the many outweigh the good of the one, or something along that lines. And this is Aquarian energy. And it's going to take us, remember, an age in astrology is like 120 generations. We're barely one generation in. It's going to be 2 or 3 generations, and I'm being very gracious here. It's going to be 2 or 3 generations before we even get to any sort of balance between individuation, which is the opposite side of Aquarius, which is the Leo counterpart to Aquarius, and inclusion and so on. And it's in the long term, it's going to be the people who are the individuals, the Leos, or the Leonian energy, archetypal energy, that is going to allow the Aquarian age to flourish. So, by the way, the last time in 1956, when we had all of these things change, we got the first transatlantic cable, we got the interstate highway system, we got the, what was it, the first hard drive, okay? All these things literally changed the world. There was this huge Suez crisis, the Middle East was shifting, and Britain or England at the time really got brought down a peg or so on, and it was, I thought it was interesting. The movies that were going on at the time was the 10 Commandments on one side and an invasion of the body snatchers on the other. That was the extremes that we were seeing in 1956. Something else about population explosions. As we move from one age into another, there is a population explosion, all right? And it's like all the entities that have ever lived want to reincarnate to experience the shift in the ages. And once the shift takes place, now over the next generation or two, there's going to be a very decent population implosion. We are going to lose a massive amount of people on the planet. And you could chalk it up to whatever you want to chalk it up to, but it's a standard in-breath, out-breath reaction of conscious entities that they want to be around for the change. They want to see the change. And then it's like, okay, been there, done that, time to move on to something else. And so I call all of us who've been on the planet right now, have been on the planet for a while, going to be around for the next 2 or 3 generations. I'm calling them the Johnny Appleseeds of the Aquarian Age. Okay. And what we do over the next few generations is going to set the stage for the next 100 generations. So it's important. It's important that we speak our minds. It's important that we talk about things, discuss things, and we don't end up being completely isolated and shut down and locked down in our own little cubicles or so on. So, okay, Aquarian Age. The Pisces Age, I like to say, was the heart has no boundaries. In the Aquarian Age, I'm saying it's the mind has no limits. Okay? These are the quotes that I'm using to define. And it's the difference between duality and synchronization. Aquarius is about mind and genius. It's the mad professor. All right, it's the aliens and AI. It's the Atlantis redo. Okay, assimilation versus individuation. Frequency and oscillation. I've talked for years about the idea that as we get into the Aquarian Age, one, it's going to validate astrology. 2, it's going to make the pharma industry, it's not going to be ingesting chemicals, it's going to be ingesting frequencies, and I'm calling it pharmonics, and it's going to be where we're able to use vibrations, oscillations, amplitude, and so on for healing. And the phrase I use for that is thoughts matter. Okay. Capricorn is the sign of humanity reaching the mountaintop, getting to the top of the hill. Aquarius is beyond the mountaintop. Aquarius is when we get off the planet into the sky, anything's possible. We are not limited to the Newtonian physics and limitations of science as we know it now. So we will end up with a religion that is probably star-based or alien inculcated, something along that lines, but it'd be curious to see what that is. All right. So Pluto's moved into Aquarius now. It's staying there for good. It's going to be there almost like 20 years. All right. What's Pluto? So I like to use the phrase Pluto is salvage and salvation. Okay. Pluto is the idea that you take something and you repurpose it, or you turn it into trash and you put it on the compost pile and it turns into fertilizer, and that regenerates the next iteration of the cycle. Now, salvation is more about the idea, some people will say that's Neptune. Well, what I'm saying is the salvation has to do with us, all the ancient myths about going down into the old underworld and coming back with a light, the old phrase, you can't get to heaven until you've experienced hell first, kind of thing. This is a Pluto issue, all right? Pluto's karma. You made your bed, you sleep in it. The United States over the last few years has been having a Pluto return. And again, easily predictable by any astrologers. If you look at this and you go, oh, okay. So the Pluto return is in the US second house of its capital and money and finances and values and so on. And so what has happened to the US in the last few years? We've lost our standing. We've lost our capital. We've blown open the debt. And we're just dealing with these few things now. But it's a 250-year cycle. And we're barely a year or 2 years into it. So, give it 10 or 20 years. By the time we get to the mid-40s, the US will have regenerated itself. Okay, so in 2025, it's very cool. We've got these wonderful external or long-term aspects. We have Uranus trine Pluto, Neptune sextile Pluto. Those are great aspects, and that means that the Pluto energy is going to be beneficial. It's not going to be always God, why, shaking you by the neck and why hast thou, left me alone? No, this is going to be something that is easily seen as something that will move forward in society. It was interesting on studying on this. I found in a book written in 1969 called The Astrologer's Notebook by Mary Elsnow, I came across her definition of what Pluto trine Uranus, Pluto sextile Neptune was going to be. And so I'm just going to read this quickly. A pattern of cohesive endeavor coordinating all aspirations into one single aim for a higher degree of civilization, which will bring great changes into the consciousness of the world. I said, wow, that's excellent. And this was written, 55 years ago or so. So anyhow, so the setup for 2025 is what we see, Neptune going into Aries in March, Saturn going into Aries in May, Uranus going into Gemini in July. Fire, and air, okay? All three will be in early masculine signs. In August, Uranus is going to make that sextile to Saturn. It's going to make a sextile to Neptune, and it's a rare event. Okay, since roughly 2011, Neptune has been in Pisces, And to me, that's the magician's spell. That's been the advent of, legalized marijuana. That's been the use of psychedelics. It's been the rise of the pharmacy industry. It's been all of the misdirection and misinformation and so on. And now Neptune is going to go into Aries. And what I'm basically saying with that one is the spell is going to be broken. Okay, now Neptune is going to go back into Pisces for a little while at the end of 2025 and into a little bit of 2026. But for all intent and purposes, when we're talking about a 165-year cycle, Neptune is about, or the spell is going to be dissipated, okay? Especially when Saturn gets into Aries shortly afterwards. Here's some of the notes I had for Neptune and Aries. There's going to be a lot of recovery centers. You know how we had the whole opioid crisis and all this kind of stuff. Well, over the next 15 years, we're going to see, the dry out clinics, the recovery centers, the AA, the drug AA. There's going to be a lot of attention paid to that. And one needs to remember that Aries is a sign of self-affirmation. Pisces was where, okay, the whole community gets involved. It's the church, it's the people, it's compassion, but Aries is not that. Aries is you survive. You figure out what you need to do and you continue to do it. And if anybody's going to stop you, you push them out of the way. Okay, this is Aries energy. You just think about the baby crying and needing food and so on. And so, what's going to end up happening too is, unlike the Neptune in Pisces, Neptune in Aries is going to be a whole lot of missionary missions, religious institutions, and these kind of things. And religion is going to rear its head again, but it's going to be one of individual inclusion. I would almost want to say Gnostic in a way, where you don't have middlemen anymore. You have a direct experience, you have direct connection, direct approach. Saturn in Aries, abstinence, perseverance, military control, grit, self-reliance, push forward, self-accountability. We put Saturn and Neptune in there, okay? And we're talking about, in many ways, I'm saying you're not going to be able to rely on Social Security. You're not going to be able to rely on health insurance. You're not going to be able to rely on all these major institutions that have been set up that are supposed to be safety nets for society. As we move a few years into this, many people are going to be left on their own. Okay, now whether it means we come up with different combinations of self-interested groups, I'm not sure. Okay, but I do know, and we're watching it crack with the insurance industries now. The next one's going to be the medical insurance industries and so on. And we're not going to be able to rely on these for the safety nets that we thought they would be. And so I'm just letting people know that as we get toward the end of the 2020s, you need to be able to be more self-reliant. And if you're not now, you've got a few years to be able to figure that out. So, one of the things that's going to happen this year too, part of an 84-year cycle, is Uranus is going to enter Gemini. Okay, and it'll move in early July, it'll move out in November, move back in May of 2026, and stay there till 2032. All right. Uranus and Gemini is about our children. Gemini is about our transportation, about our communication, and so on. But it's how we think and how we perceive and how we see the world. In a way, it's not the philosophies of the world. It's more like the nuts and bolts, the reading, writing, and arithmetic, you might say. Uranus and Gemini is going to just transport that and bump all of that stuff up. Interestingly enough, every time in the last 4 cycles that Uranus has been in Gemini, the US has ended it up in a major war too. So do we have that to look forward to? Hopefully not. At the moment, the Mars retrograde and the things that are going on are so beating everybody up a little bit. But we had World War II was the last time. Before that was the Civil War. Before that was the Mexican-American War. Before that was the War of Independence. Every time. So now Uranus stays in Gemini to 1932. So there is a lot. But if you combine that with the Pluto return, and in 2027, Pluto going over the south node of the United States chart in the second, in Aquarius, we have a lot that the US will have to atone for, I guess is the best way I would put it. We made our beds, we're going to have to sleep in it as a government, as a world entity. So, and then of course, in about 18 years or so, Pluto's going to catch up to the US moon. And the US moon, the moon in any country's chart is the people. And Pluto over the moon means there's going the generation that shifts then is going to be a very radical generation. So I'm looking forward to that. I think I'll still be around for that. So. One of the aspects that we have going on in 2025 is the Saturn sextile Uranus. It's part of a 45-year cycle. It started back in 1988. Saturn is solidity and structure and concreteness. And Uranus, I guess the way I would put it is intuition and insights. All right. It's going to be an opening sextile. The in-breath, the expansive, growth-oriented period of the time. And so the phrase that I've come up with this is the crystallization of our instincts. Okay, we're going to be able to use our insights and our tuition much more better. We're going to see more result. We're going to see more immediate affirmation that our instincts are working, that, it's not where we wonder for 10 years that we do the right thing, no. We're going to see building lasting structures, insightful, inventive, construction of homes and businesses and so on. And again, a sextile is a building aspect. It combines the energies of the two. It allows them to work together. They harmonize together. They're usually of the same, they're either all masculine, the 2 planets involved, or they're all feminine, but they easily merge together. And there's a communication that goes on, especially with the opening sextile. So now we're also going to have in 2025 Uranus sextile Neptune, which is also an opening sextile, which started back in 1993. And if you think the late 80s, early 90s, the kind of stuff that hit the world then, the personal computers, the World Wide Web, all this kind of stuff, we're just in the opening phases of that. Again, Uranus is the ingenious one, okay? Neptune is the inspirited one, is the one I like to call it. It's nirvanic, etheric, highly spiritual energy. And again, the opening sextile. So the phrase I came up with, one of the themes for this year, is a higher degree of creative expression and ascension opportunities. We are going to be able to move more into the spiritual realms. We're going to be able to use this etheric energy, the subtle sciences, the light frequencies and the sound frequencies and so on. There should be some really interesting discoveries this year around that. And again, one of the things I mentioned was the pharmaceutical companies are probably going to move into what I'm calling pharmonics, where they stop creating drugs, they create frequencies, they create harmonics and so on. So now, another one of the larger long-term aspects that's going on this year is Jupiter square Saturn. In the middle of this year, we're going to see the third of the Jupiter-Saturn squares. They started back in mid-2024. They will peak in mid-2025. But this is a 20-year cycle that was triggered in 2020. And again, if you look at everything that happened in 2020 and you look at the restrictions and the dissipation of the Constitution, I guess, the US Constitution, the things that have happened. With the Jupiter square Saturn, you'll notice that a lot of people are waking up, and there's a lot of, I call it the discovery period of time having to do with things that were born back in the 2020s. The square is like a midterm when you're taking a college course. It's where you have to lay it on the line. Well, okay, what did we learn? What's going on? Now, come November of 2025, we're going to see Jupiter trine Saturn. Okay, and then by 2029, we're going to see Jupiter opposite Saturn. And the Jupiter opposite Saturn is going to be where we see the proper justice that takes place from the things that were started in 2020. If people are talking about this one should be put in jail or that one should be, called on the carpet or whatever, I'm trying to use language that won't get me busted on YouTube. This year, especially the summer of this year, we're seeing some of that stuff coming out, but it's going to take 2, 3 years, 4 years before we actually get the legal justice that takes place because of this. And so, some of these people won't be alive then, but so it is. I just want you to realize that that's what this Jupiter-Saturn cycle, this is one of the smallest. Actually, the Jupiter-Pluto cycle is the smallest, but the Jupiter-Saturn cycle that started in air in 2020, the main peak will be 2029, will be the Jupiter-Saturn opposition. This is where we see the harvest, the fruition of those things that were born in 2020. It's interesting with the great conjunctions of Jupiter and Saturn and different elements over time. In 1980, the Jupiter-Saturn dipped its toe in air. And so for that 20 years, from 1980 to 2020, you go do a little research, you'll see all the stuff that they did with they did the cloning, they did this, they did the breaking down of the DNA, the mapping of this, and it was all this mental energy. And then from 2020 to 2020, from 2000 to 2022 or 2020, we moved back into Earth for 20 years. And so now, as of 2020, we're back in air, but back in Earth, if you look back, you'll see where there was this regression back into trying to deal with the physical elements and trying to deal with manufacturing and this and that. And it was this interesting toe dipping period from 1980 to 2000, where all of these air insights of the Jupiter-Saturn first came into being. Now they're coming full swing. We're going to see them and continue. And remember, this is a 200-year cycle. You can imagine where we're going to be, at the end of this century, so on. So the other thing, the reason I called this year the Janus year, the year of Janus, the crossover, crossback periods, when we have a retrograde, you have to realize that in the sky from the Earth, a retrograde can only take place if the planet is pretty much on the same side of the solar system as the sun, all right? And with the inner planets, it means that Mercury and Venus, they're between us and the sun. But with a retrograde, you always get inferior conjunction, or what I call an inferior opposition, where from the Earth, you're looking either at the planet and then the sun, or you're looking at the sun and then the planet, and they line up. And what this does is the the sun supercharges whatever planet we're dealing with. In January, for the first time now, since the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, okay, we are going to have the transiting sun conjunct Pluto in early Aquarius within 24 hours of Inauguration Day. This has not happened, and let me explain what that is. Okay, so every year the sun goes into Aquarius. That's roughly January 20th. That's why the US did that, because the United States was an Aquarian-based country. And so they moved the Inauguration Day to the day the sun moves into Aquarius, give or take a day. All right. This time around, as that's happening, the sun is going to be conjunct Pluto. And remember, we only get Inauguration Day every 4 years. And so 4 years ago, Pluto was back in Capricorn. 4 years from now, Pluto's going to be way past the degree for the Inauguration Day. So this is it. This is the sun conjunct Pluto in Aquarius. And as I've mentioned in my January forecast, that even if we didn't know who was going to be president, even if we didn't know that he has all of these orders that he wants to sign on day 1 and day 2 and day 3 and so on, from an astrological perspective, whoever would have been president at this time is going to make some major changes. And it is Pluto in Aquarius. It is the transformation of the concept of society, the concept of brotherly love and sisterly love, and what that's going to turn into. And unfortunately, for the first few years, it's going to be separative. We're trying to create as many genders as we can. We're trying to create as many different issues as we can in the world, rather than the idea of, oh, okay, we're all in this one place. So back on topic, the retrogrades in 2025, there's a lot of them. And it's mostly due to the idea that this year we get Venus and Mars both retrograde in 2025. Okay, we get the normal Mercury retrograde 3 times, sometimes 3.5, 4 times, but all the other planets, they go retrograde almost half the year. But because of Venus and Mars, we get 10 retrogrades this year, where you can only have max 11 retrogrades in a year. And so there's these crossover crossback points. And in particular this time, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 planets that are crossing back and forth. They don't just go backwards in a sign, like they retrograde in Leo and then turn direct in Leo. There's 5 planets that are retrograding in one sign, backing into the previous sign, and then moving forward into the new sign. And so there's this crossover cross-back period, or the Janus, looking forward, looking back, and so on. And it's sporadic all the way through 2025. And so one of the things you can expect in your personal life and the societal life and the communal life, you're going to hear everybody talking about, oh, what it used to be like, and oh, look what we can do here, and jumping forward. And especially the first half of the year, we're going to jump forward into all these things, probably with the new Trump administration, okay? But come the fall, roughly, and into the spring of 21, we're going to be, wait, hold on, we forgot something, don't lock the door. We need to go back and bring forward some of these things that we are willing to, or society thinks we should be letting go of. And, and what's the sign that comes before the Aquarian Age? In the zodiac, okay, not in the zodiacal ages. It's Capricorn, okay? And Capricorn energy is about holding on to traditions, holding on to things that are worth keeping the buildings, keeping the systems in place. Aquarius says, no, we're going to ditch those systems. We're going to try something new. We're going to, and you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so 2025, I think, is an excellent year for us to perceive what we can do moving into the future, but remembering to bring from the past, remembering to bring from the last since 2008, what needs to move into the future. So, and remember, since 2008, Pluto has been in Capricorn. The Sun-Pluto conjunctions every year was in Capricorn. And look what that has done to the major institutions, the classic governments and so on. They're teetering, they're tottering, there's cracks, there's crumbles, they've been exposed to the light. The same thing is going to start happening now. Actually, this is the second year that we had the Sun-Pluto conjunct in Aquarius. But for the next 18 years, we're going to have the Sun-Pluto conjunctions every year, roughly February-ish, in Aquarius. And this is going to give us radical transformation, radical evolution. Partly having 5 planets in Scorpio and partly because I love the planet Pluto. To me, all mutation is evolution. Everything is about moving forward and creating a new species and so on. And this is what we're dealing with this year, you know. And we move into fire, then we move back into water, and then we move into fire again. This is the big issue. And what's fire in astrology? Fire is the assertiveness. It's the inspiration to start something. It's the chutzpah to challenge somebody. It's, you know, to say to somebody, get out of my way. You know, I'm coming through. Pardon my whatever, but just you're either with me or you're not. You know, and the water sign is more the emotional connectedness. You cry with me, you know, this kind of stuff. It's the intuition and the instincts and intuition and so on. And so we can expect this year, especially for the first half of the year, up until about July. It's really interesting. January through May is really quite neat. All right. But then June, when I go through the years, I'll explain the up downs and the low months, but July is a low month, okay? October's a low month, November's decent, December's a low month. And this last 2 weeks in December, by the way, horrible for transportation and movement and so on. And so for the holidays in 2025, do not plan to take a plane somewhere and go visit your relatives halfway around the planet. If you can't drive there, probably best not to do that. I'll tell you that now, okay? When you look at the last 2 weeks in December of 2025, it's like, yeah. So, okay. There's a system that I like to use in astrology. It's called the Geodetic System. Dane Ruger talked about it. And you basically take the zodiac, 30-degree slices of the zodiac, and you lay it over the equator of the planet, and you line up the Sphinx with the Leo-Virgo cusp. Okay, that's the most obvious one. And then mark off 30-degree segments all the way around the planet. Now, it's not exact because the poles have shifted. And so where the tops are, I'm not quite sure. The further you go north or south, the more leeway you have to leave. But with that system, the Pacific Northwest of the US is the only part of the planet that's Pisces. Mount Shasta sits within 1 degree of the end of the geodetic system. It's at 29 degrees Pisces. Another less than 70 miles east of us, and we're moving in Mount Shasta, we're moving into Aries, okay? And so if you think about the idea of Mount Shasta, everybody likes to call it the root chakra, you know. I don't think so. I think it's the end of Pisces. It's the jumping off point. I think it's the crown chakra, you know. And again, okay, 6 of one, half a dozen another. At the end of Pisces, it might be the crown, but as soon as you get to the beginning of Aries, we're at the root again, you know. So we're at this jumping off point. But one of the things I just learned today when I was reading the book, that the word telos, where everybody thinks Telos is the underground city around Mount Shasta. Well, the word telos is ancient Greek, okay, for the end or the completion or the perfection of something. And so to me, that seems to warrant the idea that, okay, as we move eastward along the Mount Shasta, and it's interesting, Mount Shasta is in Pisces, San Francisco is in Pisces, but Los Angeles is in the Aries part of the zodiac, and the middle of the US is Aries. The East Coast is Taurus, which is the money center, and you could follow this all the way around here, okay? And so something, now we're going to get 4 eclipses this year. The 2 that we have in March, the lunar is going to hit all of the Americas, north, south, central, you name it, all the whole side of the planet. The solar that we get in March is going to hit a lot of Canada on the East Coast, but pretty much the New England area of the United States, nothing more. So the eclipses in March are hitting the US. The ones in September are on the other side of the planet. They're opposite the Americas. They're through Asia and Russia and so on. And the one solar that happens in October or September, that the only landmass it hits is going to be New Zealand. So New Zealand is on the board for stuff happening this fall. So we'll be curious to see what happens there. In 2025, Jupiter is moving from its detriment in Gemini to its exaltation in Cancer. And you can kind of make out just from the phrasing of the word detriment, it's detrimental. Jupiter and Gemini, I mean, yeah, Jupiter and Gemini doesn't work too well. It talks too much. It spills the beans. It gives too much information. It's pestering us from every which side. If you look at all the news, alternative right and media and all left and progressive news sources that have come out, we're getting bombarded with it, okay? Jupiter going into Cancer, that's nice, especially for the US, okay? Having 3 planets in Cancer. It's going to go over the Sun, Venus, and Jupiter return in the US chart. So best time in 12 years. Now, we are dealing with Jupiter in Gemini up until, was it, June, I think it is. But that means Jupiter is activating the 6th house, 7th house area. It's activating the Mars and Uranus in Gemini. And then Uranus is moving into Gemini. And so as Jupiter leaves, Uranus is moving in. And so that doesn't bode well for us staying in our own neck of the woods. Okay, that bodes well for us getting involved with foreign wars. We need to really do some verbalizing to our government masters here about what we want, what we don't want, how we want to deal with this. This is probably going to get me banned from YouTube, but I'm really thinking that one of the things that we need to do is, as a citizenry, is withhold our taxes until we are allowed to allocate them where we want them to go, not just where we give them to somebody and they use them where they want to use them. This would be interesting. I mean, I've heard Trump talk about getting rid of the income tax and this kind of stuff. Well, maybe we'll get there. We'll be curious to see. By the way, I don't agree with all of Trump's policies. I have, from an astrological perspective, said for like the last 8 years that he was going to be president. You could see it in his chart. It was this. I'm curious to see if he's actually. My predictions along that line was also, well, he might not make it to the inauguration day. And then after a little bit more study, it was like, oh, okay, so this Mars retrograde that's going back and forth, it just moved out of his 12th house now, or retrograded back into the 11th. So he's out of danger at the moment. But after April 22nd, it's back in his 12th, and on May 10th, transiting Mars will conjunct his Pluto in the 12th house, along with some other things transiting Pluto in his 6th house. And these are all issues of being taken out through poisoning, this kind of stuff, but it's not a good thing for health. So we'll see that regardless of who's a Democrat or Republican, who's in the White House, that's not a good thing. So in June of 2025, which will be right after the May stuff I'm talking about, Jupiter will square Saturn, square Neptune. And I'm saying this is going to be probably the most repressive period of 2025. And so I'll be curious to see what happens in through there. Jupiter is going to move from Gemini into Cancer. And I'd like to say that that's going to give us more satiation and more security. I call it justice for the little people, On the negative side, Jupiter in Cancer, it's overconsumption. It's too much of a good thing. It's like, oh, okay, we're saved now. The U.S. can go on and just take over this and start drilling that and start manifesting this and start. Nope, it's going to be one of those things where we just kind of go overboard with it until we get into Jupiter, into Leo, and then it's like, oh, wait a minute, hold on, we need to have some authority here going on. So, and it's interesting, now that Jupiter is in Gemini and going into Cancer, with the US having all those planets at the end of Gemini and into Cancer and so on, normally, on average, Jupiter takes 12 years to go through a sign. It'll hit about one planet on average in a person's chart once a year, roughly. Okay, 10 planets that I look at, 12 signs, one sign a year. In the case of the United States, now we are going to have, in less than a year, in 2025, Jupiter is going to hit half the planets in the US chart. It's going to hit Mars, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, the Jupiter return. It's just like, holy, it's already hitting the Mars. It's going to hit Mercury at the end in December of 2025. And so this, when I think of that, I think of how Trump is such this larger than life figure and just takes on these huge topics and considerations and so on. And so we can expect, at least until May, maybe past that, there's going to be these huge expansions of the US. I mean, I was even looking at the topics where he was saying, oh yeah, let's make Canada the 51st state, or let's buy Greenland again. And he goes, wait a minute, that's Jupiter in Cancer, okay? Be a little careful with that. That's not something, you don't want to overextend yourself so much where you're fighting these political battles or these military battles on multiple fronts and things like that. And it's like, no, it's not going to be good a year down the line, so okay, when a planet crosses over into a new sign, as it's going to do multiple times this year, okay, because it's going back and forth, when it moves forward into a new sign, the energy is inventive, it's progressive, it's creative, and it's also forgetful, okay? Because you're into all this new stuff, you forget what you used to do, okay? When a planet crosses back into a sign, it's conservative, it's preservative, it's homogeneous, and it's condensing. And then as we remember, and so again, for the first half of this year, on a personal level, on a national level, and so on, there's going to be all these new systems that we put into place. There's going to be all these new progressive ideas and so on, even with the conservative in the White House, okay? But it'll be in the fall and the spring of 2026 is where we're going to be, oh, wait, back up, I forgot something again. I got to go back. So now looking to 2026, right? There's two major things that are coming up in 2026. And matter of fact, many of the things that are happening that are beneficial in 2025 are because of the major thing that's coming in 2026. And I'm calling that the mystic bowl of the summer of 2026, when you're going to have Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all in these beautiful opportunistic opening sextiles and trines, and it forms a bowl, and we are going to be able to retain and contain things from the cosmos that we have not been able to do in a long time. And especially July 21st, 2026, the moon will end up being a handle to that bowl. And that's called the bucket aspect, where the moon will be opposite all of those, well, not opposite, but across the zodiac from all those other planets in the bowl. And that is going to be an interesting day. I'll tell you right now, I have no idea what's going to happen because there's so many things, but the summer of 2026 is going to be amazing. The other thing that's happening in 2026 that we're being affected by is the Saturn-Uranus Saturn-Neptune conjunction coming up, where they're both moving into Aries this year. They're both going to move back into Pisces, and then by the end of the year, early part of next year, they move back into Aries, and they can join right at less than the first degree of Aries. That's why I'm talking about the idea of we're going to have to be self-serving at that time. Because Aries is that in general, but the earlier degree of any sign is much more raw energy. So when we're talking about less than 1 degree of Aries, there's going to be a lot of things that are initiated, implemented, and instigated that are going to be, what the, stop, wait, back up. Do this again. And so we're going to get both of those next year. And fortunately, or unfortunately, really, the Saturn-Neptune comes before the mystic bowl. Now, with this in line about me saying that the mid-2020s is the roaring 20s, the new roaring 20s, the Saturn-Neptune in Aries is going to unleash a radical amount of new businesses, new opportunities, new paths, new avenues, new love interests, new, the Robert Frost, the road not taken kind of thing. Well, there's going to be a lot of that. There's going to be a lot of people who just break off with their metaphorical machetes to create these new paths. And this is 2026. Again, in the US, the Saturn-Neptune is going to be in the 4th house for the US chart, which especially emphasizes the idea that the homes, the mortgage industry, eminent domain issues, border issues, they'll be changing. The major sacred documents of what we have built our republic on, some of those are going to be changed. I would not be surprised to see a constitutional convention open up where then you can change all of them. But, the idea will be, oh, well, let's just change a few, let's get rid of the 16th Amendment and taxes. And so it opens, once you gavel a constitutional convention into session, any of the Constitution can be changed by vote. So we'll see. I would like to call that the new republic, and we'll see. That would be nice if that happens. That would be appropriate for the Sun-Pluto conjunction in Aquarius over the next 18 years or so. It would be much more of a democracy rather than a public. It would be much more of a true democracy. So, okay. Let me just stop here for a second, and if there's any questions, let me look at, see what was on here. Anybody have any questions? You can raise your hand or unmute your mic and just, so. Nope, good. Okay, I'm going to go month by month now, and at the end, I could talk about some of the big figures like Trump, Hillary, RFK Jr., Klaus Schwab, and so on. I looked at their charts, but let's start with just the month by month, okay? And one of the things that I did is I graded each month from 0 to 10. 0 being the worst of the year, 10 being the best of the year. And so I'm going to go through and just give you those initially so you can kind of see how we're moving. And so January, I gave it a +4, which is average would be 5. February, we get the +7. March, we get +10. So we're moving up. April, +7. May is +9. June falls to +2. Okay. July jumps back up to +8. August down a little to +4. September +6. October +4. November +7. December +2. Okay, so you can use that later on to kind of look at whether it's an easy month or a harsh month. The higher the number, the easier it is. The lower the number, the harsher it is going to be. So okay, with January, one of the things that we're seeing, we just experienced it with the speaker, was his name Johnson, and just got reelected now in the Congress. Trump's picked for the Speaker of the House. And we're dealing with Mars-Pluto oppositions. We've got 3 that are going on since November, and it'll continue until April of 2025. The first Mars-Pluto opposition was a day or 2 before Election Day. And boom, Trump gets elected. The second Mars-Pluto opposition was a day or 2 ago. And boom, Trump gets what he wants in Congress. The third Mars-Pluto opposition is going to be somewhere around the 23rd, I think of it is, in April. And that'll be part of Trump's 100 days. That's right as Mars is going back into Leo for the first time. Mars spends the first few months in 2025 in Cancer, so everybody's going to be jacked up emotionally and so on. But once Mars goes back into Leo, that's Trump. Trump has Mars in Leo on a Leo ascendant. And so, and he's going to be at the peak of his game. Whether he gets taken out by March, we'll see. But it's toward the end of May and into June when Trump will have transiting Mars go over his ascendant. Now, whether that's remembering him or whether that's exalting him, I'm not sure. I haven't really wanted to look past that. All I can say is I'm not too impressed with J.D. Vance and his chart, especially since we don't have his time, and it's really hard to pin down stuff. But we'll see. hopefully we're not going to end up with, if Trump has to leave office in some fashion in this spring, we won't end up with Trump Jr. as vice president. I would really, because that was one of the main reasons that J.D. Vance was elevated, because him and Trump Jr. are besties, you know, and this is a legacy thing for Trump Sr. Yeah, or well, the older Trump. So I would really love to see just have RFK Jr. made into the vice president. We'll see. I've been saying for a long time, RFK Jr. and Trump would be an excellent team, but it didn't work out that way. So in January, we get this. We get this Mars-Pluto opposition stuff we're dealing with. We're going to see the Sun-Pluto conjunction in Aquarius day after Inauguration Day. The first 3 days, or first 3 weeks of January, we have the Sun, Mercury, and Mars all in opposition. Sun, Mercury, and Pluto all in opposition to Mars. That's a lot of oppositions. That's, you know, and so it's going to be a rough month the first 3 weeks. It's just there's going to be stuff that we wish we didn't hear. There's going to be these things that are going on where people are blowing up stuff and running over people and so on. Unfortunately, that's likely to continue, at least until Inauguration Day. Most likely after that, too. But, okay, so January. February, Jupiter goes direct, Mars goes direct. We get the superior conjunction, the Sun and Mercury, all positive stuff. Venus goes into Aries, starts the retrograde cycle, all positive stuff. It's a +7. I mean, what can I say about that? Venus starts its retrograde cycle. There'll be a Venus-Neptune conjunction right at the beginning of February, which is, oh, everything's beautiful, everything's wonderful. You know, we have the new administration or whatever. But we're going to get 3 Neptune, Venus-Neptune conjunctions over the next 3 months. All right, so it's not until we get to early May that we're going to see the 3rd Venus-Neptune conjunction, and that will be really when we see the more, what would I call that? I would call that like a Snow White moment. You know, for the first few months of 2025, Snow White's having to deal with the dwarves and the Wicked Witch and so on. But by the time we get to May, you know, Snow White kind of wins the story. And so March, both Mercury and Venus go retrograde. They're going to both back into Aries. They're going to both conjunct Neptune. They're both retrograde back into Pisces. They're going to both conjunct Neptune in Pisces. Sun, Mercury, and Venus are all going to conjunct Neptune in Pisces in March. I mean, that's just the beautiful dreamer. Okay, what did I call that? The shamanic release. That's kind of a just, oh, everything's coming up roses. Spring should be really nice. It'd probably be wet, but it's probably going to be really nice. Okay. The only harsh aspect in all of March is the Sun square Jupiter. And again, squares to Jupiter are usually not very harsh. They're usually busy. You know, so March is going to be pretty nice. We have the eclipses, the solar and lunar eclipses happening, both activating the US or the part of the US in the eclipses. But again, usually eclipses are things that trigger new cycles. The lunar eclipse triggers an immersion of energy over the next few weeks. The solar eclipse instigates a birth that can take up to 18 months thereafter. You know, so March I like. March is good. March will be Betty good. April 2025, +7. Mercury and Venus both station direct, go both back into Aries, and Mars goes back into Leo. So we pump up the fire energy again in April. Okay, we'll see the third Mars-Pluto opposition. This time it's squared, it's T-squared by the sun, so that end of April is going to be tumultuous, but I think in a positive direction. If people are not of a mindset that, oh, we need society to take care of us, oh, you know, the safety nets are disappearing. If people are not caught in that take care of me syndrome, April is going to be really nice. If they are caught in that, April's going to not be that great because people are going to be left kind of on, metaphorically speaking, out on the sidewalk in some issues. So May, Saturn joins Neptune for a dip into Aries. So Neptune's now in Aries. Saturn moves into Aries in May. The Sun and Venus are going to make a conjunction to Uranus. There's a superior conjunction of the Sun and Mercury again. There's only one harsh aspect in May, and it's a Mercury square Mars, which is only good for like a few days. You know, so May is really nice. It's a +9 again. But it's moving forward. We're moving more into air signs and fire signs and so on. And we're building, we're peaking from the beginning of the year. June is probably the hardest month of the year. There are many harsh aspects, especially inconjuncts in June. And inconjuncts are the sandpaper effects. They're where you have to get on your hands and knees and scrub someplace and use some elbow grease to draw. It does draw out the shine in the floor or the sandpaper in the wood. You end up with something beautiful, but it takes some sweat equity. It takes some, emphasis and some pushing. And June's going to have a lot of that. So, what else can I say about June? July, nice month. There's 7 nice aspects, only 2 harsh aspects. I gave that a +8. All right. Gemini, Uranus is going to dip into Gemini for a little exploratory look at, Gemini. We're going to, considering that's July, you're going to expect that there's going to be some major announcements about how we go about our educational year come September and what they want to do different and who gets put in place and all this stuff. And so there'll be some really big changes in the education system, transportation, especially. Well, one of my long-term predictions is that by the time Uranus gets out of Gemini in 2032, we will have figured out ways, and this has to do with quantum physics and so on and everything, but we will have figured out ways to transport solid objects from one place to another without having to move them across the face of the earth. That's going to change Amazon. It's going to change the post office. It's going to change shipping. You name it. But probably by about 2032. Okay, you can turn your mic on. Oh, you can't hear me? Turn your mic on.
Okay.
At times, what did you want to say?
At times you freeze, and so we're texting, and at times we lose your audio and video. So just make sure Koala is checking up, so she marks you. So because we have a lot of questions because we missed you for about 3 minutes.
Oh, really?
Froze off. So on and off, whatever it is, we're having a high solar effect right now after the solar flare.
Okay.
So, but just have Koala by the phone. That way she flags you. That'd be helpful. Okay.
Will do. Okay, so July, we get 3 retrogrades in July. Both Saturn and Neptune will stop in Aries and start their movement, their cross back into Pisces. And Mercury goes retrograde in Leo in July. And so this is where we start the downgrade of the year, or the downhill slide. I don't mean it in a negative sense. I mean in that most of the energy through the year up until about June is optimistic, outgoing, opportunistic, and so on, innovating, and so on. By the time we get to July, things start to hold back. It's like, oh, okay, well, maybe we moved a little bit too fast, too quickly this year. And let's go back again. Hold the door open. Don't shut the door. There's some stuff we need to go back and check on. But it is a major, just the idea of having 17 different crossover, crossback periods is this huge alteration. Even you could even use the alternating concept, back, forward, back, forward, back, forward, up, down, up, down. So July still a +8. August drops to a +4. Not so great. Okay, there's this, the sun forms a yod to Saturn, Neptune, and Pluto. That's 3 in conjuncts. Okay, the sun will square Uranus, that's 1 square. Mars will be opposite Saturn and Neptune. That's a lot of friction, a lot of heat, a lot of retribution. The outer aspects are doing great, but the inner aspects are just the sun and Mars and Mercury. So there's an interesting dance that goes on too. On August 14th, Mercury will make a sextile to Mars. They're both in forward motion. But then again, on August 17th, Mercury will make another sextile to Mars, both in forward motion. And you rarely see that. And the reason that's happening is because Mercury is coming out of a retrograde and it's speeding up. And it hits Mars, and then with Mars direct and Mercury moving on, they hit a second time, but they're both moving forward. And that's kind of a unique thing. You usually don't see something like that very often in the cosmos, where the faster moving planets kind of catch up and move, but they're always going in the same direction. All right, and so I call that the tortoise and the hare move. Okay, and we can watch that in August. We can watch that, what they do in Congress. You know, they'll probably be kept in session in August, where they usually like to be able to break and go on. I don't think Johnson or Trump was going to allow that to happen. There's going to be too much stuff going on, and there's going to be too many things that they want to do. There's the concept of Trump with the recess appointments and all this kind of stuff. I think we're going to have a very busy August when it comes to the government manipulation or what we do. And I don't mean manipulation in a bad sense. I mean it in the things that they try and pass and do and get moving. But this year, transiting Uranus is squaring the US moon. And again, the US moon is the populace of the country. And whereas I'm saying 2025 is a great year, I mostly mean it for business and opportunity and development and the for lack of a better word, the capitalist foundations of our country. People-wise, for the individuals, there's going to be some tightenings of the belt. There's going to be some dancing and bobbing and weaving that has to take place, because most people don't like change. And this is going to be a major year of change, even into 2026 too. So September, I called September, it's a +6. I said, we take it back in September. Saturn retrogrades back into Pisces. Uranus retrogrades back into Taurus. There's the solar and lunar eclipses. Mars goes into Scorpio. And when Mars is in Scorpio with all these other planets in masculine signs, we don't end up with a lot of good aspects from Mars and Scorpio to the other planets. Okay. We end up with very harsh aspects to Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Saturn, kind of a militaristic kind of thing, especially the third week in September. And so September is going to have to be where we really have to speak up again. It's going to be one of those months where we have to rattle a few cages as a population to make sure that we're not stepping in something that we won't be able to extricate ourselves as a country for a year and a half. No. October, Pluto goes direct, Neptune retrogrades back into Pisces. Venus will be opposite Saturn and Neptune. With the aspects in through there, I only gave October a +4. There's a lot of strategy. There's the Mercury conjunct Mars. That's another one. Mercury conjuncts Mars, not sextile to Mars, but Mercury-Mars conjunction. This is strategy sessions, militaristic moves. This is sudden implementation of transportation projects and military projects and so on. And so it's going to be a busy time for us in October. Mercury conjunct Mars is kind of decent when it comes to the idea, oh, let's get out there and get ready for winter. Let's get out there and do our fall cleanup and, that kind of stuff. So that works. All right. But the Venus opposite Saturn, Neptune means we're probably going to have to spend a little bit more money than usual. And the dreams that we had for the fall are not going to be as palatable as we would like them to be. They're going to take more effort, more energy, more money, and so on. But it will be a productive time. So, that's why I only gave it a +4. So November 25th is the busiest month of the year. Usually I'll have a longhand page for each month of all the different aspects. For November, I had a page and a half. There's so much going on. Mercury retrogrades back into Scorpio. Uranus is retrograding back into Taurus. Jupiter is retrograding back into Cancer. Saturn is turning direct on Thanksgiving, by the way. In Pisces, there's the Sun, Mercury, and Mars are all in opposition to Uranus. There's planets changing direction 5 times in November, moving back and forth. And so it's a crazy month. It's and again, with Saturn station on Thanksgiving, one of the things we're really probably going to have to do is acquiesce to the paternal, to the generational figures in the family. It's not a time to buck the traditions, the so on, because Saturn station is going to be all over the board. Neptune is all over the board. Again, you might just, for November, you might just want to make Thanksgiving very simple. Don't try and get a lot of things done. Saturn stationing, it kind of upends physical reality, the idea of, oh yeah, the turkey's going to come out great, or we got 12 servings, wait a minute, what happened to 2 of the forks? Or it's that kind of thing where, oh no, there's no stores open, we can't get you really need to be prepared when Saturn turns direct. The idea that it turns direct on a holiday is a little cautious, I would say. So now December, the first half of December has 6 negative aspects and 4 positive aspects. The second half of December has 10 negative aspects and no positive aspects. So there's a major shift from the beginning of December of 2025, the second half of December of 2025. The Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars all make squares to Saturn and Neptune. All four of them in conjunct Saturn, all four of them in conjunct Uranus. That's just like, just let me hibernate this December. I don't want to have to deal with people. I'm not going to want to have to go anywhere. This is what I'm saying would be wise to do in 2025 for the second half of December. If you want to go visit relatives the first 2 weeks and take everything then, yeah, do that. Okay, but gosh, I don't want to be near an airport, near a freeway the last 2 weeks in December. It's not going to be good. Well, before I open it up to questions, if anything, because I pretty well covered everything. And so I want to let you know that you can subscribe to my monthly newsletter. Just go to MountShastaAstrologer.com, spelled out. It's easy to subscribe. You can support me on Patreon if you want, as little as $5 a month for the monthly forecast or whatever. And that's patreon.com/Mount Shasta Astrologer. I do Zoom readings. I do readings for individuals, relationships, couples, businesses, families. And if you're ever in Mount Shasta, stop by. I'm right on the main road here. Been here for many, many years and know the right spots to go to. So what else? That's really about it. So I would like to, you guys can all unmute your mics and start hitting me with questions, or I'll start looking at the chat, I guess. So, no questions? I was that good, huh?
Oh, Glenn.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead, Stephanie. Oh, wait. Why does it say Stephanie Lawrence there?
Oh, sorry. We call him today Stephanie Lawrence.
You might need to turn your volume up a little bit there.
Okay.
Okay, shoot.
There. Okay.
All right. So, in general, it sounds like 2025 is going to be a pretty good year then.
I like it. I'm impressed. 2020, some of them have not been that great, but 2025 and 2026, I'll take it. I'm glad to be around at this time. Now, like I said, there are going to be things that we as a culture, as the United States population is concerned, there's going to be a lot of changes.
Changes are good.
Yeah.
In the long run, I do think they're going to be good, but there's going to be a lot of people that bitch and complain about it. And that's the whole Carlos Castaneda, the petty tyrant thing. You're not supposed to be honoring the people who make life wonderful for you. Honor the people who make life difficult, because they're the ones that get you up off your butt to do things and move and cross boundaries and borders that you normally wouldn't do.
Right.
To grow. Yeah.
Okay. 25 is good. Thank you.
Yeah. Long story short, I could have said that at the beginning and that was it. That would be it.
Okay. I have, before you answer Leslie and Joshua, what about the economics? How is the economic for the United States looking?
With things like the cryptocurrencies and stuff like that, I've been saying for years that it would peak toward the end of 2024 with Uranus at the end of Taurus. And once Uranus goes into Gemini, it's going to be outmoded. So but the second half of 2025 might be okay. It's probably going to be very volatile for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, but I don't really see a big future. And regardless of who Trump puts in place or whatever, there's just too many things. Uranus and Gemini, by the way, would be we see how the sun has been throwing off these flares and really messing up. And they're talking about how, oh, okay, over the next year, we're at the solar peak, solar maximum. Uranus and Gemini warrants incoming crap from the solar system, coming through space, hitting the Earth, upsetting the transformers that run the electrical systems, or wipe the hard drives, or the satellites and things like that that are not militarily protected. So economically speaking, I think we'll be okay for the first half of the year. In the second half of the year, we're going to go back. And fortunately, I mean, for most people in the US, that gives everybody a chance to stock up on their supplies and grow their food and make their moves and collect the wood for fireplaces or things like that. But I do think that the fall of this year, especially, August and November and the end of December and so on, they look kind of harsh, so economically, Uranus and Gemini is going to be all over the board. I suspected that by the time Uranus gets out of Gemini, I thought they'd come out with the CBDC stuff. We still got almost a half a year, so we'll see. But I highly expected that to happen. And then while Uranus was in Gemini, them trying to work out all the problems. But if you look at the exchanges, the cryptocurrency exchanges, how they're getting hacked all over the place, and how our communication is getting hacked all over the place. And Uranus and Gemini, that's what that is. That's communication. We're going to have to come up with some better systems of security. And fortunately, that will probably take place, by the end of the 2020s, but not necessarily 2025 or 2026 right away. So it'll be too experimental. Maybe.
Yes. Okay.
Economically, for the U.S., the main thing the U.S. has got coming up is this Pluto. I mean, yes, Jupiter over five planets in the U.S. Great, woohoo! America's back, baby, kind of thing, But the Pluto going over the South Node, getting closer and closer by 2027. We're probably not going to feel it that harshly in 2025 to 2026, but by the time we get to the end of 2026 and into 2027, the U.S. is taken down a few pegs. There's some karma that they have to pay off. Pluto over the South Node is, you made your bed, you lie in it. That's what that is. And if you look at what we've done over the last 2.5 decades, kind of, it's like, how do we deal with that as a population, not as a government, but as a people?
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Glenn, I have a question.
Okay.
You mentioned I've taken a look at RFK Jr.'s chart, and you mentioned earlier that you had as well. I'm wondering what you're seeing for him this year.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't go over some of the ones. RFK Jr., we don't have any time for him, okay? But he has 8 planets conjunct US planets. That's a lot. That's an intimate connection with the US, the government, the concept of what the US is supposed to stand for. His sun, Mercury, and Venus are conjunct the US Pluto. That's somebody who would know how to transform the government. His moon is conjunct the sun, Venus, and Jupiter of the US chart. That's somebody who has empathy, who feels for the population of the people, and so on. I really didn't make any predictions for him. The Mars retrograde that's happening is conjunct his Uranus in the 6th. And so there is that. I suspect he's really not going to get moving and with any of the stuff that he really wants to do until Mars gets back into Leo, which is April. And that until that time, he's got Mars retrograde in the 6th. That's not the best for health. That's trying to get used to a completely different routine, which I can understand the position he's in. But I wonder if others are going to be able to deal with that. I wonder if he's going to be able to deal with that, if he'll stay healthy enough. I'm thinking that the first few months he's going to overdo it, and it won't be until about April that he kind of hits his stride here.
Okay,
So,
thank you. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Hi, Glenn. Just a quick follow-on to that. This is Joshua. Nice to see you again. And thanks for bringing this gathering together and sharing some of your insights. Yeah, so as far as the socio-political aspects that you talked about with the US might kind of relate to Peter's question in the chat there. Is there anything to note about world relations, global perspectives in terms of relations between the US and others or outside of us completely? And also, have you done any chart work with our Elon character in this country?
I did, but I didn't dredge it up for this talk. I mostly look at the idea, okay, so Jupiter's going to be going on through the descendant side of the US chart. That's trying to get involved in everybody's business, okay, which especially this year. But in 2026, we get that Saturn, Neptune in Aries in the 4th house of the US chart. And that's a very nationalistic or individualistic approach. And I suspect that's what's going to happen is the Trump administration is going to try all of these different treaties and rehash these different things and so on. And then by 2026, part of him is just going to go, well, excuse my French, but fuck this, it's just, we're going to just do our own thing and take care of our people and deal with our own stuff. And I'm not enough of an economist to understand what that would do to the US economy. I do know that I just recently saw this chart that until we passed the income tax for over 100 years, the US government was anywhere from 50 to 100% funded by tariffs. That's it. That's all they needed. And that once we loosened the tariffs and started internally supporting the government, we've gone off the deep end. And so the idea of possibly returning back to just tariffs and getting rid of taxes may be great. Again, it's gonna be a little bit of belt tightening for most people the first few years of doing that. And so sociopolitically, I think the US is going to try and make a whole bunch of strides in 2025, but by 2026 and 2027, they're going, nope, sorry, you guys are not, you countries out there are not interacting the way we want to. We're just going to go it alone. So we'll see. Does that answer in any way?
Yeah, thanks for that. Just kind of curious between like the third party influence to government itself from business within this country and the third party influence of this country's business to external. It'll be intriguing to see how some of these things lay out in the next year.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the universality of some of the major businesses and corporations out there, this is going to be fought a lot, by the corporations. But as we onshore more corporate money, wealth, manufacturing, you name it, again, it's going to take a few years, not just 2025, that lessens the global input. And again, this Saturn Neptune coming up in Aries is for the whole planet. It's not just for the US. All right? Saturn Neptune at almost 0 degrees Aries is everybody will be on their own. is the best way I could put that. That you're going to have to deal with your own population. You're going to have to deal with your own commodities and your own abilities and so on. And that we are not going to have anywhere near the transfer of global dollars that takes place now. And so it is, I think we're on a pretty much an isolationist path around the planet. So some might say nationalistic, but let's see, Vicky.
Hi, Glenn, have you looked at when you're talking about, more nationalistic and drawing within? I am, as I'm sure you are, extremely concerned about the takeover of the entire US government and most of the corporations and guidance and Trump's appointments of Zionists. So I'm very concerned about, I don't separate Israel and the United States. That's why we call it capital USR, small AEL. I don't think there is any separation. So have you looked at what's happening in Gaza? What is likely to happen in the Middle East?
Okay, I did look at the chart for Israel since 1948, the chart from 1948. And the second half of 2024 and the first half of 2025, Israel has transiting Uranus over its country's sun. The one time in 84 years. It's never happened since 1948, and it's only going to happen for this half year into 2025. To me, the way I was putting that is, and it's in the 8th house, if I remember correctly, too, which is foreign influence and so on. And okay, it's happening, but one of the things I had said when I was first looking at it, the borders of Israel are going to change. I expected them to get wiped out. I didn't expect them to move into Syria and move through Gaza and move this, but they still have to make it till something like May of 2025 without getting gassed or blown off the planet, because that's Uranus. Uranus is a sudden change and national identity. The sun in a U.S. chart is the government. So will the Netanyahu government fall? Yes. Will it be replaced by something that's just as beholden to the U.S.? I don't know. I would like to believe that, yes, he did, move the embassy back to Jerusalem and so on, but I would like to believe that Trump's playing a long game here, and he's just placating the Zionists, and we'll see. But I do think that we should be hands off Israel, because Israel is going through some Uranus over the sun. It's a once in 84-year cycle. It's the sudden change of the government, sudden change of the identity of the culture of the country. And I suspect it's going to be the change in borders and so on. So I don't really wish any negative things on the country. I do think that it's going to have some radical changes. I do remember too that one of the things that had happened, Saturn Neptunes, when you look back through history, the Balfour Declaration, which was set up the whole Palestine should have a free land and so on, was implemented under a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And we're moving into another Saturn-Neptune conjunction again, which is a roughly 36-year cycle. So we'll see. I think it was 2 cycles ago with the Balfour was. Stephanie.
Oh, Stephanie. Brett to Stephanie.
Yeah.
So AI has been around it's been getting studied and worked on for like 30 years now. But I would say in the last probably year is when it's really started to launch. The technology's allowed it to start moving much, much faster. What does the technology wrapped around AI look like going from now into like 2026 to maybe even up to like 2032?
What Uranus and Gemini, it's almost too hard to predict. It does, it's the cyborg stuff, it's the Neuralink things, it's the space exploration, it's sudden insights and discoveries and inventions around frequency modulation, radioactive isotopes, and all this kind of stuff. The idea that AI is pretty much beholden to the GIGO, garbage in, garbage out philosophy, that it's basically learning itself on all the stuff that's out there that people talk about. The more people talk about something, the more likely the AI is going to say, oh, this is it, which is not a good thing. I mean, it's democratic in a way, but with all the whole bots thing and so on, somebody who has access to that kind of stuff can sway education, can sway information just by pummeling the planet with bad data.
Yes.
With bad communication, and so it's not going in the right direction right now. How they're training this thing, I don't know how. I mean, I just got the flash of somebody being able to hook a brain directly up to a computer for the computer to be able to harvest everything that a brain's individual brain can have of the memories. But then again, you've got the emotional biases, the personal biases. Where do you I don't know. I just do know Uranus's Gemini is really going to mess with education. They're going to try and figure out ways to just download information into our students, into our children, so that they don't have to attend school, in any 9-to-5 fashion kind of thing. And I'm not so sure that's a great thing, but we're moving. Oh, economic. This is something I wanted to say about the economic nature of stuff. With all this cosmic stuff hitting and the solar maximum going on with the sun, the economy is very, very susceptible to what I would call burnouts or solar blackouts, due to wiping. And we are so dependent on electricity and the interconnectivity. I mean, just look at what happened with the Carrington event. What was that, 1850s, 1860s? It just messed up. At the time, it was all telegraphs, and it just screwed all of that up. So think about that now, what would happen. And I mean, what is it? The internet goes down for an hour, and it's $500,000 or no, $500 million in commerce or something like that. It takes out, so the economy is going to go through a lot of roller coaster as Uranus first goes into Gemini. It's what is Gemini? Gemini is the 6th house for the US, 6th house, 7th house area. It's that Mars Uranus that the US has. I have been saying off and on that I suspect that there would be, I use the phrase boots on the ground in the US. What I mean, we have that now, but what I mean, there would actually be a public display of the declaration of war against the US by certain countries in 2025 going into 2026. And that those, when that happens, that does tend to eventually reinvigorate an economy because the world goes on to a wartime footing, you know, but at what cost? You know, it's just, to me, it's very hard for me to believe that there are so many people out there now who are willing to, for money or for security or for safety, do these negatively influencing things. You know, the health insurance industries, the wartime industries. How can somebody, you know, who's building these bombs, how can they feel okay with the idea that it's probably going to kill somebody? Whether it's of your country or not. To get past that part, to me, that's very disheartening, you know, and I'm actually glad, this is probably going to get me kicked off of YouTube again. I'm actually glad that I see with us moving into the Aquarian Age, a major depopulation happening, because it's going to make a lot more people, even though there'll be less of them, a lot more people concerned about others, concerned about the neighbor or the community or the village, or the, you know, we're going to return to a more localized sense of compassion.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be about saving the whales or the kids in Africa or the, you know, the biolabs in Ukraine. It's not. It's so. That's a good thing, I guess. I don't know. A lot of people are going to leave the planet. It's just, it's part of the in-breath and out-breath that happens. And it seems to be tied to the changing of ages. Everybody wants to be here. And as the age starts to change, we get these huge population. And then once the age hits for the first 100 years or so, it just goes back down. So, Harriet, you had a question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can. Let me raise you up a little bit. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm concerned about what's going on with the military-industrial complex in the United States and how that interfaces with what we're faced in the next year or two.
Well,
especially in the Ukraine, what's going on is there's this tremendous change in how they do war. There's this tremendous drone warfare where they have mass drone attacks, and there's in Russia there's this tremendous technology increase in perfection of these drones.
yeah, well, that's the Uranus.
And that's like that Uranus
and Gemini.
And Gemini. And the U.S. Mars is war in Gemini.
Yes. Yeah.
So I can see this country, the MIC, the military industrial complex in this country, they're all watching what the Russians are doing and taking notes. I could see them doing this horrible technological advance and like unleashing it on parts of the world, like in the Mideast. And that's kind of my nightmare, because it is a possibility.
And I'm saying yes. You know, I'm saying that will happen. We are going to have a population depopulation period of time for the next few decades at least.
But it isn't going to be the US, it's going to be us doing it to the world.
It's going to be the whole planet. The whole planet is moving in the Aquarian Age. It's just not one country or the other. Okay. And Gemini is about duplicity and multiplication and
yes.
so on. And so, you know, Uranus and Gemini, Uranus rules airplanes and drones
Yep.
and sky stuff. And so, yeah, the idea of having that. Now, the complex, the industrial, medical, educational, whatever complex you want to call it, complex is a Capricorn word. Okay. The complexes have really come into being with especially the power that they've really manifested has been while Pluto has been going through Capricorn. I mean, yes, it's been going on, but they really jacked up their thumb screws since 2008. But what it has done is it has the Pluto in Capricorn has brought light to that. They're showing their cards. We see what that is. We see how it's manifest. We see how it's been created, how it's being manipulated, and the governments and so on. Pluto in Aquarius is going to shatter that. It'll take 18 years, but it will shatter that. We are going to the U.S. As I said, I suspect the documents of the U.S. to change. I expect the boundaries of the U.S. to change. I've been waiting for Texas to secede, but now maybe with Trump in there, it's not going to happen until 28 or 29. But we remember the good old days, I guess I say. One of the things that we need to remember about moving from Pluto and Capricorn into Pluto and Aquarius is that we can't forget how this stuff played out. We can't forget what happened in 2020 or what happened in 1993 or 1989 and these kind of things. And we have to be the ones that remind our children that this happened. Otherwise, they're going to get mind numbed into forgetting history, forgetting the past. And it's something that I'm in the process of turning what I thought was going to be a reality TV show into a book called The 12 Things You Need to Know About the Aquarian Age. And one of the things is that the Aquarian Age, we are going to forget. We're going to forget the things that were good, the things that should be maintained, like libraries or things like this, that systems or archaeological finds or things like that. It's going to be very difficult to hold on to those things. And it's something that we have to realize that is a inherent instinct about Aquarius, which was to rise up past the physical, to get past the old systems, to create some new system, and let's get everybody involved, give everybody a say, everybody counts, and it's not.
Well, there's a negative aspect of Aquarius rebellion where they rebel against the evil oppressors, yet they create a system which is evil and oppressing.
Yes, and
the Bolsheviks, for one.
Well, this is one of the things what I'm talking about when I say it's going to take a few generations now that we've moved into the age of Aquarius before we come to the proper balance of the negative and positive side. And that the world has struck the bell of Aquarius and it's rattling big time. And so the pendulum now, or the center of the bell, is swinging left and right extremely harshly. And I've noticed it, especially since like 2019, we've gone way over past, into the negative side of Aquarius, and give it 10 years and we'll start to move way back, and then
that's a good way of saying it. What's really disappointed me in the last 20 years is I've going, oh great, Neptune in Pisces, wow, we're going to really have a spiritual evolution and a spiritual movement that's going to sweep the planet, kind of like Gandhi, and I've been waiting for it, and it's never come.
Yeah.
Was I really deluded? I I have Venus in Pisces, so maybe I was just really deluded.
There you go. I've called Neptune in Pisces the magician, the stage magician.
I'm disappointed.
Here, well, while things are going on in here, the misdirection, the misperception, the whole rise of the pharmaceutical complex, well, these kind of things, it's all been Neptune in Pisces. And Neptune in Aries.
What about a world saint like a Gandhi? I mean, and is that no avatars coming in the Aquarian age? No human avatars?
There will be some, but they won't be avatars per se, because Aquarius just wouldn't allow somebody to be the leader.
Come on, they did Lenin. Lenin was an Aquarius. What can I say? Anyway, yeah.
Well, he tried,
Yeah.
didn't he get shot?
Yeah, he did get shot, and he died a kind of miserable death.
Yeah.
His mind went, and he was in an asylum, and he never really recovered from being shot. And at that point, Stalin and Trotsky were maneuvering for power, and Trotsky lost.
Yeah. Now, Putin, by the way. By the way, I just want to make one point. Have you noticed how Hillary Clinton is in the news lately?
Oh God. Okay, I'm gonna shut myself down here.
Okay, she has her moon at 30 degrees of Pisces, and she has 30 degrees of Gemini rising, and so the Saturn and the Neptune both are going to be going over her moon. Okay, and Uranus, when it goes into Gemini, is going to activate her ascendant again, and I highly suspect that by the summer of 2025, she is going to be running again. She is going to be in the news. She is going to be the Democrat bulwark. What's that word? Upholding the Democrat Party. We will see, but I suspect by looking at her chart. In May and June, transiting Jupiter is going to conjunct her natal Uranus and conjunct her ascendant in May and June, and that's her. She's manipulating it now, but she's going to be back on the scene big time. Come the middle of this year. And for all of you WEF folks out there, Klaus Schwab. Okay, I've mentioned this a few times over the last few years. His time has come and gone. 2020 to 2024 was him. Now he's having his Saturn return. And by 2027, he has transiting Neptune conjunct his natal Saturn in the 8th house too. And the negative side of transiting Neptune conjunct natal Saturn in the 8th is nothing you tried to do manifests. It all just dissolves as you're trying to, and because it's the 8th house, it comes from outside of you. It comes from other entities, other developments, and so on. But we're not going to have to worry about that. We're not going to have to worry about him, at least, and what they're trying to do. And that's actually one of the good things about the isolationist tendencies of the Saturn Neptune in Aries, because it's opposite this globalization concept. And so I do think that it is going to pull down a lot of the complexes. They're just going to make bad decisions, make bad mistakes, go down blind alleys, and come to naught. Unfortunately, again, what that does is that leaves the people on their own, and having to thrive within smaller units rather than global or continental packages, so. Anybody else? past 6 o'clock, so I probably should wrap it up here. Thank you, everybody, for the, and again, this will end up on YouTube or Rumble or something, and I'll let people know. You should be able to. I made it so that you can download the video or the audio of this on your own, but if you want a copy of this, just let me know and I could send it to you when Zoom gets finished doing its thing. So,
Great, thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Okay, now I'm going to go have something to drink.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, and again, I got to remember to do this. You can PayPal me, you can Patreon me at Mount Shasta Astrologer. You can sign up for my newsletter. Those are free. You can, oh, there she is. The dogs. Okay, so I'm going to go. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.